The chill of autumn hung in the air as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the skies with streaks of orange and purple. Mark Evans stood on the front porch of his modest home, staring absently at the passing cars. It was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where children's laughter and the distant hum of lawnmowers created a calming backdrop. Yet tonight, Mark's mind was far from serene. Thoughts churned, reflecting the storm brewing within him. Mark had always been meticulous, a trait that served him well as a systems analyst for ABC Industries. His job demanded precision, problem-solving, and the ability to anticipate future challenges, skills he prided himself on. But lately, his personal life had been unraveling in a way he couldn't control. The strain on his marriage to Lisa, his wife of 6 years, had become undeniable. What had once been a strong bond was now fraying at the edges. The first signs of trouble had emerged subtly, a change in Lisa's tone during conversations, moments of quiet tension, and unexplained late evenings away. At first, Mark had dismissed his suspicions, chalking them up to the stresses of daily life. But one fateful day, he discovered a series of text messages that left little doubt in his mind. They were from Blake Moore, a man Mark once called his closest friend. The revelation of betrayal cut deeper than he could have imagined. Determined to gather evidence before confronting Lisa, Mark employed his analytical expertise. He installed tracking software and meticulously documented her movements. The confirmation was undeniable, and it left him reeling. What he saw, Lisa spending long hours at Blake's home, felt like a cruel twist of fate. The pair had both betrayed him, and the pain pushed Mark into an emotional abyss. Over the following weeks, Mark struggled to navigate his emotions. He sought solace in his work, using the rigors of his job to distract him from his personal turmoil. Yet each day, as he returned to the house he shared with Lisa, the weight of the betrayal bore down on him. The routine, the dinners, the small talk, the shared spaces, all felt hollow. Mark began planning his escape, a way to leave behind the hurt and forge a new path. On a brisk Saturday evening, the fading sunlight bathed Sharpsburg in a soft golden glow as Mark Evans guided his car into the garage of his suburban home. Emerging from the side door was a man with neatly combed dark hair, juggling a collection of items, a laptop, a briefcase, and a well-worn duffel bag. Evidence of a life marked by frequent business trips. The quiet hum of the neighborhood contrasted sharply with the chaos stirring in his mind, a turmoil he was determined to confront that night. Entering his house, Mark didn't call out to his wife, Lisa, since he knew she wasn't home. He placed his belongings in the living room and hung his coat by the door. After removing his tie and unbuttoning his shirt, he changed into casual clothes. He'd just returned from a regional meeting in Pittsburgh for ABC Industries, where his expertise as a systems analyst required his presence, though he wasn't technically a manager. Mark had told Lisa the trip would extend through the weekend, partly to buy himself time and avoid coming home too soon. He regretted not packing more casual clothes. He always traveled in formal attire. After a quick shower, he had dinner and relaxed with a beer, reading the newspaper in his chair. But despite looking like an ordinary husband unwinding, he was simply biding time, struggling with unresolved grief. Having spent a month processing the stages of grief, he hoped to make progress that night. Around midnight, he began tidying up, delaying the inevitable. Finally, he grabbed a light jacket, went to the side door, and started his nightly mission. Just before leaving, he remembered to quickly send an email, logging into his laptop one last time. With his plan in motion, he drove out of the garage and disappeared into the night. The next morning at 7:37 a.m., an emergency call came from a woman who had found a car in George Washington Park. Doors open, lights on, and blood everywhere. She ran to a payphone to report it, mentioning no injuries but expressing fear of whoever might be responsible. The operator assured her help was on the way, but the woman refused to wait, hanging up before any further details could be gathered. Hours later, Detective Peter Nesbitt arrived at the Evans house and spoke to Lisa, who was surprised to hear about Mark's car being found in the park. She insisted Mark was in Pittsburgh, but the detective confirmed the car's details matched Mark's registration. Lisa suggested the car might have been stolen, but Nesbitt pressed her for more details. Lisa called Mark's phone, but when the detective answered, her shock was evident. The detective explained that Mark's phone had been found in his car and was now evidence in a potential crime. Lisa's worry deepened when Nesbitt explained the situation. Mark's car had a bullet hole, and there was no sign of him at the park. Lisa, now frantic, called the hotel in Pittsburgh where Mark always stayed. When the hotel confirmed he hadn't checked in, her confusion grew. Inside, she realized Mark's briefcase and laptop were still in the living room, further complicating the mystery. The detective called for a search warrant, explaining to Lisa that an illegal search wouldn't hold up in court. Lisa, still in denial, insisted Mark wasn't involved in anything illegal. But as the detective pressed her for answers, she began to fear the worst. Her panic escalated as she realized she had no idea why Mark had come home early, and the possibility of him being in danger hit her hard. "Mark could be hurt," she cried. "You have to find him." Detective Peter Nesbitt softened his tone when he saw how upset Lisa Evans was. "We don't know much yet, Mrs. Evans," he reassured her. "There's no evidence that your husband's involved in anything wrong." He suggested she make coffee while waiting for his partner to secure a search warrant. Lisa calmed down slightly, beginning to make coffee. However, she tensed again when Nesbitt mentioned he would need statements from everyone involved. They sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, as Nesbitt explained the details of the crime scene: the car found in the park with a bullet hole, blood, and signs of a struggle. The car had been towed for evidence collection, and forensic teams were still investigating. Within the hour, Detective Klein arrived with the search warrant, and forensic technicians began searching the house, garage, and car. Nesbitt arranged for DNA samples from Mark's toothbrush and razor to compare with the blood found at the scene. Lisa became so distressed that Nesbitt had her sit in the living room while the search continued. After the search, the detectives took only Mark's briefcase and laptop, which was password protected. Nesbitt asked Lisa if she knew the password, and she provided a possible one, but none of the attempts worked. "We'll have our techs handle it," he assured her. Nesbitt then asked Lisa for a statement about her weekend. She recounted her Saturday routine: chores, a call from Mark around 1:30 p.m., shopping, dinner, and staying at a friend's house. By the end of her account, Lisa was visibly tense. As Nesbitt wrote down the details, he mentioned they might need more information later. He also asked for recent photos of Mark for identification purposes. Lisa handed him a photo album, and Nesbitt selected 2 good images of Mark. When he noticed a man in one of the photos, Lisa explained that it was Mark's best friend, Blake Moore, not a relative. Afterward, Nesbitt joined the forensic team in the garage. While inspecting Lisa's car, they discovered bloodstains on the gas and brake pedals. The blood was identified as human, and the car was towed for further analysis. Nesbitt expressed his concerns to his partner, David Klein, about Lisa's potential involvement, especially with the suspicious blood in the car. The detectives returned to the house and told Lisa about the blood. She was shocked and denied any knowledge of it, claiming she hadn't been near the park. She handed over her shoes for testing. As the detectives left, Nesbitt remained unsure about Lisa's role in the situation. "Do you think she's innocent or just a good actress?" Klein asked. Nesbitt wasn't sure. They agreed to investigate the couple further, talk to friends, neighbors, and anyone who might know something about why Mark came home early. Nesbitt hoped that would provide the key to solving the case. On the drive back to the station, both detectives reflected on the case, but no new information came from the lab before they ended their shift. They were left with more questions than answers. Peter and Dave arrived early the next morning, eager to make progress on the Mark Evans case. They were greeted with a stack of forensic and medical examiner reports, which they spent the next hour reviewing. After finishing, they realized more reports would be coming in. Peter glanced at one and said, "These reports seem to point in the same direction, but we shouldn't rush. Let's see if the computer techs find anything else." David agreed. "I think you're right. In the meantime, we can talk to his lawyer and colleagues. We're not ready to arrest yet, but we need some formal statements before approaching the DA." The detectives headed to Mark Evans' lawyer's office around 9 a.m. Lawyer Robert Graham quickly confirmed that the emails they'd obtained from Mark's computer were genuine. After thanking him, the detectives left and drove to ABC Industrial, where they met with Mark's boss. Klein asked, "Will Mark be staying in Pittsburgh until Friday night? He had seminars this weekend." The boss responded that Mark was expected back Friday night. When asked if Mark seemed off lately, he mentioned that Mark had been more brooding, but had said everything was fine when asked. After the meeting, the detectives headed back to the station. By late morning, they had received preliminary DNA results and saw a strange box with wires and a forensic report. The new information, along with maps from the techs, helped them fill in some gaps. They spent a few hours piecing everything together in an interrogation room. By the afternoon, the detectives felt ready to question Lisa Evans. They arrived at her house unannounced, hoping to catch her off guard. When Lisa opened the door, she immediately asked if they had found her husband. Detective Nesbitt replied, "No, but we've made progress and need to ask you some questions." Lisa invited them in, and they sat down. Klein opened his notebook and asked, "Is there anything you want to tell us about your relationship with Blake Moore?" Lisa grew pale. "What? Blake's just Mark's best friend," she said, clearly rattled. Nesbitt pressed, "Are you having an affair with him?" Lisa denied it, but her reaction suggested otherwise. The detective stood up and Klein said, "We need you to come to the station for a formal statement." Lisa panicked. "Am I under arrest?" she asked. Nesbitt assured her, "You're not under arrest, but we have reason to believe you haven't been truthful with us." Lisa agreed to come to the station and led them to their car. After a silent drive, they brought her into an interrogation room, which they had deliberately chosen to be dreary and uncomfortable. Nesbitt asked, "Are you sure you don't want a lawyer?" Lisa shook her head. As she sat, tearful, they set up the cameras. Klein instructed the team to make sure both cameras were recording, anticipating that this might be the turning point in the case. While they prepared, across town, a Crime Stoppers volunteer answered a call, offering up to $1,000 for tips leading to solved crimes. The case was moving forward, but things were about to take an unexpected turn. The Crime Stoppers volunteer hesitated before an older man spoke up, asking, "Is this where I can get money for helping the police?" The volunteer explained, "It depends on the information and how much it helps. Do you have details about a crime?" After a pause, the man responded, "So I don't get money now? What if the cops try to scam me?" She assured him, "We just need to confirm you helped. The money isn't from the police, so they won't trick you. If you tell me what you know, I'll give you a number to call back in a few days to see if it helped." The man grew impatient. "I need the money now." She replied, "If you're hungry, I can give you shelter addresses, but I can't help with cash right now." "I don't need food. I need juice. Grape juice," he clarified. Grinning, she said, "If your info is good, you might be able to afford all the juice you want." The man then shared a tip. "I saw a guy toss a Colt and 2 shovels into the river under the 3rd Street Bridge on a Sunday morning. He had a rifle, and I thought he'd shoot me." The volunteer took notes and asked, "Was this by the East Side parking lot?" "Yeah, he tossed them from the dock. Shouldn't be hard to find," the man replied. He added, "The guy was big with blonde hair and his car was dark blue. The plate started with AZS, but I forgot the rest." The volunteer thanked him, assigned him a tip number, and assured him that if the information helped, he'd be paid. Within an hour, a police diver recovered the Colt and shovels from the river. By mid-afternoon, the items were at the crime lab, and the Colt's ammunition matched a recent shooting in George Washington Park. The lab technician immediately informed the detectives, who then began reviewing the reports. Detective Klein suggested they split up. Klein would question Lisa Evans while Nesbitt went to bring in Blake Moore. Lisa sat calmly when Klein entered the interview room. He reminded her that the room was being recorded, and then asked bluntly, "Are you having an affair with Blake Moore?" She hesitated before admitting, "Yes." Klein slid evidence across the table, emails and maps from her husband's laptop, showing he knew about the affair. Shocked, Lisa asked, "How did Mark know? How could he track me?" Klein revealed a tracking device installed in her car, allowing Mark to monitor her whereabouts. "You mean he knew for weeks?" she asked, stunned. Klein nodded. "He even planned to confront you and Blake, but he never made it there." Lisa's eyes widened. "But Mark never showed up. I was with Blake all night." Klein produced more evidence, blood on her shoes and in her car, matching her husband's. He explained that DNA tests confirmed Mark's blood was found in the park, and a Colt linked to Blake Moore was recovered. Lisa denied it, claiming Blake was innocent. "We had nothing to do with it," she insisted. Klein warned her, "One of you will have to tell us where Mark's body is. If you help, we'll consider it during sentencing." Lisa broke down, insisting, "Mark isn't dead. I love him." She clung to her story, claiming that if Mark was hurt, it wasn't their fault. Lisa Evans hid her face in her hands, sobbing, clutching a soaked handkerchief. Detective Klein gave her a few moments to compose herself before presenting more evidence. When she seemed calmer, he said, "The medical examiner confirmed your husband's end of life. Based on the blood loss and the lack of treatment, there's over a 95% chance he's dead." He handed her the report and photos of their crime scene. The gruesome image made her cry harder. Klein gathered the papers and left, telling her, "You're not helping yourself by refusing to take responsibility." Meanwhile, Detective Nesbitt drove to Blake Moore's house, arriving just as the backup patrol car pulled up. Moore answered the door and agreed to go to the station for questioning. Once at the station, Blake denied having an affair with Lisa Evans, but soon admitted it after being confronted with emails and surveillance reports. He denied involvement in Mark Evans' disappearance, suggesting Mark might have staged his end of life to frame them. Nesbitt was skeptical. "We have the Colt used, and a witness identified you in your car. Don't invent stories." Blake became agitated, explaining he had been afraid of Mark since high school and had avoided getting involved with his girlfriends. Despite this, he admitted to the affair with Lisa, claiming it had been building over time. Nesbitt pressed further, asking if things had gotten out of hand with Mark's end of life. Blake denied knowing what happened, but insisted he and Lisa hadn't planned it. "I don't believe Mark organized his own homicide. He had a lawyer for a divorce, so why would he do that?" Blake argued. Nesbitt responded, "We have enough to get a search warrant for your home, car, and office. I suggest you come clean now before it's too late. If you tell us what happened, you might get leniency." Blake refused, still claiming Lisa might have orchestrated it on her own. As Nesbitt left, he told Blake, "When two criminals work together, one always tries to blame the other." In the hallway, Nesbitt joined his partner, who handed him a report confirming that the shovels found in the river were traced back to Moore's landscaping. Nesbitt shook his head. "Why do they think we won't find out?" Later, the detectives briefed the district attorney, presenting enough circumstantial evidence to press charges, even without a body. Within the hour, both Lisa and Blake were charged with Mark's homicide. They maintained their innocence as their Miranda rights were read, knowing their fate now rested with the prosecution. After the arraignment, Lisa and Blake were taken to the station for fingerprinting and photos. Blake scowled the whole time, and Lisa's face was streaked with tears. Once back in their cells, they finally spoke. "What are we going to do, Blake? They can't believe we did this to Mark, right?" Lisa asked, her voice heavy with hopelessness. Blake replied calmly, "We'll need our own lawyers. Unless you want to share one with me. Might save some money since we're both accused of the same thing." Lisa shook her head. "This whole thing is messed up. I'm sure Mark set us up somehow. Maybe even paid someone to film it and leave clues for the cops." Blake was shocked. "You really think he would go that far?" Lisa frowned. "Why wouldn't he? I know Mark. If I thought he'd find out about us, I wouldn't have even touched you." She broke down again. "But he wasn't violent. Not like this." Blake continued. "I'm shocked he didn't do something when he found out about us." Lisa wiped her tears. "I don't know how or when he found out. He didn't act any different. When we met, it was always quiet, secret. Maybe he planned it all." She sighed. "Even if he's not dead, he's still going to want a divorce." Blake was blunt. "You had to know it was going to end badly. The first time you came over to my place..." Lisa stopped him, her voice quiet. "You're right. I just hope he can forgive me." After a pause, she suggested calling Robert Graham, their attorney, to share costs. She was escorted to a private room to make the call. Graham, already Mark's attorney, couldn't represent them but recommended a colleague, Basil Smith, an experienced criminal lawyer. Lisa agreed, and Basil was on his way. When Smith arrived, he got straight to work. After reviewing the charges, he asked them to summarize what had happened. Lisa told him, tearfully, "I had nothing to do with what happened in that park. I love Mark. I couldn't hurt him." Smith turned to Blake. "Your turn." Blake remained calm. "We had nothing to do with Mark's disappearance. I think he set us up. He paid someone to liquidate him and frame us." Smith paused, considering their words. "We'll focus on getting you out of here. The prosecution will likely set bail at $100,000 for each of you. Can you afford it?" Lisa was shocked. $100,000? Smith reassured her. "You only need 10%, $10,000, to post bail. The rest isn't required unless the judge orders it." He added, "You'll be arraigned tomorrow. You'll spend the night here, but you'll be able to arrange bail in the morning." That night was sleepless for both, surrounded by noisy cellmates and greasy takeout food. The next morning, their appearance in court went smoothly. Both pled not guilty, and bail was set at $100,000. Blake was able to pay his $10,000 bond quickly and was released by afternoon. Lisa, however, found her savings account empty. Desperate, she called her parents, who reluctantly agreed to help after much persuasion. It took longer than expected, and Lisa spent another night in jail. Her new cellmates, two drunken courtesans, kept her awake most of the night. By noon the next day, after securing the funds, Lisa was finally released and returned to her empty house. She showered, crawled into bed, and ignored her phone, letting the answering machine handle the calls. The following month flew by for Lisa and Blake. Early on, Lisa learned that her husband, Mark, had withdrawn money from their joint bank account before disappearing. About 10 days before his disappearance, Mark had emailed his lawyer, Robert Graham, saying he was taking the cash to prevent Lisa from claiming his legal share in the upcoming divorce. There was no mention of what happened to the money, but Mark said he'd give up his share once a divorce agreement was reached. Lisa and Blake met regularly with their attorney, Basil Smith. He had spoken with the district attorney and reviewed the evidence, believing the lack of a body and witnesses would make it hard to convict. After securing their bail, Basil suggested hiring a private investigator to explore whether Mark had staged his own disappearance. Lisa didn't buy it, still holding on to the idea that Mark could have been a sufferer of a botched carjacking. Despite her doubts, she wasn't ready to accept the possibility that Mark might be dead. The private detective turned up little. Basil also had the investigator follow up on a tip from a winemaker who had reported seeing discarded homicide weapons. The detective couldn't trace the tipster and found nothing useful. Though Basil didn't directly mention it, tension was growing between Lisa and Blake. After his release, Blake suggested they could meet freely now that Mark was gone, but Lisa rejected him, tearfully blaming him for ruining everything. Blake responded coldly, and their relationship soured completely. A little over a month later, Basil arranged a meeting with District Attorney Jeff Bagden, hoping the charges would be dropped. Lisa and Blake were overwhelmed by questions from friends and wanted the case cleared to move on. Bagden, dressed casually and appearing young for a DA, surprised them by offering a plea deal, 8 to 12 years for second-degree homicide. Shocked, Lisa and Blake denied any involvement. Basil questioned Bagden about the evidence, and the DA revealed new DNA findings. Mark's blood was found on Blake's car, and a piece of plastic at the crime scene matched materials from Blake's landscaping business. Lisa, furious, accused Blake, but he denied it, claiming she was with him when it happened. Basil intervened, urging them to stay calm. Bagden continued, stating they had enough evidence for trial, including the fact that Mark had been shot and dragged into Blake's car before being buried. DNA from both defendants had been found at the scene, and witnesses had seen Blake disposing of evidence. Despite the shocking revelations, Lisa and Blake both rejected the plea deal, convinced they could beat the charges in court. Basil left them with a lot of work ahead preparing for trial. After they left, he reviewed the evidence, wondering if either client was being truthful. Several months later, the trial began. Judge Cox called the court to order, and Basil sat between Lisa and Blake, trying to manage the tension between them. District Attorney Bagden's opening statement was direct. He explained that, although Mark's body was missing, the evidence pointed to Lisa and Blake as the butchers. Emails showed Mark had discovered their affair and was preparing for divorce. Bagden described how Mark had likely been shot during an encounter at Blake's home and then disposed of in a remote park. Forensic evidence, including blood on Blake's car and items linked to the crime found by Crime Stoppers, connected both defendants to the scene. Lisa lost her composure, and Basil had to calm her down before Bagden finished. He claimed Lisa's blood was found in her car, implying she was involved in the crime. He predicted their defense would be self-serving testimony, with each defendant blaming the other. Bagden's statement set a grim tone for the trial. Basil's objection was weak. He reminded the jury that they were innocent until proven guilty, but it was clear that Bagden's opening had a strong impact, leaving the defense with a tough road ahead. The first witness, a computer expert, testified that he found emails and maps tracking Lisa Evans's meetings with Blake Moore. Mark Evans had used a device to map the route and times of her meetings. One reporter noted the tracking company, Rocky Mountain Tracking, believing it would attract future clients. During the testimony, Blake seemed bored, and Lisa appeared embarrassed. Basil Smith couldn't challenge the tracking evidence, and the session broke for lunch. The afternoon saw testimonies from emergency operators and patrol officers who described discovering Mark's car. When detectives and the medical examiner took the stand, the scene's grim details emerged, with photos of bullet wounds, blood, and drag marks. The medical examiner confirmed Mark had lost around 4 pints of blood, and evidence of a major artery being severed suggested he was dying when moved. Lisa screamed, "No, Mark can't be dead," and was excused for the day due to her emotional outburst. The second day began with a brief continuation of the medical examiner's testimony, focusing on blood sample tests. Basil Smith cross-examined him, suggesting Mark could have survived with prompt medical help, which the examiner conceded was possible, though unlikely. Next, a forensic expert discussed bullets recovered from the scene, identifying them as military-grade full metal jacket rounds. Basil questioned whether they had passed through bone or flesh, but the technician found little residue on the bullets. The Colt used in the shooting was untraceable, though no fingerprints or DNA linked the defendants to it, which was a small victory for the defense. The forensic team also discussed 2 shovels found with Moore's landscaping branding, confirming no fingerprints or DNA, but indicating a strong link to Blake Moore. Cross-examination on blood found in Blake's car suggested it could have been planted by a third party, a theory the technician admitted was possible. However, blood found in Lisa's car and on her shoe was harder to dismiss, though Basil tried to create doubt about whether it was transferred. By the end of the day, the prosecution's case seemed strong. The press speculated that the defense would struggle, especially with the mounting evidence against Lisa and Blake. Basil Smith appeared focused on raising doubts about Mark Evans's end of life, hoping to create enough uncertainty for the jury to question the prosecution's case. The defense's first witness was Dr. Wilbur, a blood analysis expert. When asked about the medical examiner's testimony, he stated that blood evidence could have been collected more accurately, and he believed as little as 1.5 pints of blood could have created the scene. He also confirmed that a person losing that much blood could still be alive. The prosecution didn't cross-examine him. Blake Moore, the next witness, claimed he was innocent and suggested Mark Evans had orchestrated his own homicide. He also denied owning a Colt and suggested the shovels found in the river might have been stolen from his company. When cross-examined, Blake explained a past conflict with Mark, but couldn't adequately explain why Mark would have orchestrated his own homicide. The prosecutor implied Blake was a narcissist, which Blake visibly resented, but Smith objected, and the judge asked the jury to disregard the remark. Next, Lisa Evans took the stand. She denied being involved in her husband's end of life, claiming she loved him and suggesting he may have been carjacked. However, when pressed by the prosecutor about her whereabouts from midnight Saturday to Sunday afternoon, she awkwardly detailed her time with Blake, including intimate moments, leaving her embarrassed. The prosecutor then used her admissions to challenge her claim of loving her husband, implying her actions contradicted that. Lisa became emotional, and the judge ended her testimony. In private, Basil Smith expressed concern about the trial's outcome, as both clients had struggled on the stand. The defense rested, and closing arguments followed. The prosecutor emphasized the defendant's lack of credible explanations, while the defense highlighted the circumstantial nature of the case, the absence of Mark's body, and the possibility he was still alive. By 4 p.m., the jury began deliberating and returned their verdict the next day. Lisa and Blake anxiously waited at Smith's office. At 3:30 p.m., they learned the jury had found them guilty of second-degree homicide. Lisa cried, and Blake slammed his fist on the table. They were handcuffed and taken into custody. Lisa spoke briefly with her parents, expressing her innocence, before being led away. They were informed they would be sentenced in a week, ending the day on a somber note. The week between conviction and sentencing passed quickly. Lisa's parents visited daily, while Blake, who had no surviving family, was only visited once by a cousin. Time seemed to drag for him, and he realized how bleak his future looked. Lisa, still in denial, refused to discuss her future when her parents brought it up. The sentencing hearing was brief. Both were sentenced to terms ranging from 15 years to life. Defense attorney Basil Smith expressed sympathy and promised to review the case for a possible appeal. Things moved fast after sentencing. Within 3 days, Lisa and Blake were transferred to state prisons. Lisa went to a well-regarded women's facility, while Blake was sent to a prison with a history of riots. The media quickly lost interest, and soon after, news stories dominated the news cycle. A couple of months later, Basil and prosecutor Jeff Bagden met for a drink. Basil remarked, "You really went after them," referring to their hard-fought case. Jeff responded, "I was surprised by the conviction. They never wavered, but the jury didn't buy their story. I try not to take these cases personally, though." Basil reflected, "I guess you're right, but this one still bothers me." A year later, a news article caught Basil's eye. Blake Moore had been stabbed in a prison riot, leaving him in serious condition. It made Basil think about the case again. By then, 18 months had passed since Lisa and Blake's conviction. Basil had reviewed the case multiple times but found no legal grounds for an appeal. One quiet Wednesday morning, a receptionist at the Innocence Project received a package. Inside was a DVD, a sealed black bag with a biohazard label, and a multi-page letter. As she read it, her emotions fluctuated. After finishing, she called Tony, saying, "We just got a package that I think the team should see. It involves several homicide convictions that may need to be overturned. A minute later, a tall, red-haired young man in a white shirt and worn jeans emerged from one of the offices. He thanked the receptionist, took the package, and disappeared back through the door. The young man was Tony Kelly, a recent law school graduate. Before pursuing a high-paying job at a Wall Street firm, he wanted to contribute to public service. He had been working at the Innocence Project for almost a year, primarily handling legal research for the senior attorneys. While he didn't plan to stay long, he enjoyed making a difference for those wrongfully convicted. Sitting back in his swivel chair, Tony placed the package contents on his desk. After a quick glance at the DVD and sealed bag, he began reading the letter carefully. Leaning back in his chair, feet propped up on the corner of his desk in his Nike sneakers, he started reading the letter. It was typed neatly on a computer in an easy-to-read font, and he quickly became engrossed in its contents. The Innocence Project, New York. Regarding the convictions for the homicides of Lisa Evans and Blake Moore, I'm not sure where to begin, so I'll start from the beginning. That way I can lay things out clearly and hopefully cover everything important. My name isn't crucial, but the information I've been asked to share with you could significantly affect the lives of the 2 men wrongfully convicted, as well as the future of 5 other people, one of whom is me. Let me start with the day nearly 15 months ago when a man walked in off the street in response to an ad I placed in the local paper. I was looking for someone with computer skills to help me run my small IT services company. After a short interview, it was clear that he knew just as much about computers and business networks as I did. Since then, I've learned that he knows even more than I do. I hired him on the spot. This man, whom I'll call Mark in this letter, was probably the quietest person I'd met in a long time. His silence didn't affect his work, which he did exceptionally well. In fact, within 2 months, my business grew by at least 50% thanks to his efforts, advice, and the long hours he insisted on working. When he started, Mark mentioned that he was new to town and hadn't found a place to rent yet. At that time, my business was still in its early stages, and I was thinking of renting out the basement room in our house for extra income. I wanted to reinvest everything I made into the business to help it grow and eventually support me and my young son. I knew renting the room to Mark was a gamble, but there was something about him that made me feel safe. We fell into a routine that continues today, though the dynamics have shifted over time. Mark spent the first few months living in the basement, though he ate with us and commuted to and from work with us. Initially, he often went back to the office after hours, working without asking for extra pay. He told me that he preferred being productive rather than wasting time watching TV or sleeping. As time passed, our relationship changed from a professional one to a friendship and eventually to something much deeper, a loving family bond. My son now calls him Dad, and it feels genuine in every way. From the start, I knew something was bothering Mark. His quietness and tendency to zone out into deep thought about things I couldn't understand led to a confrontation of sorts between us. One afternoon when the office was quiet, I locked the door and called him into my office. I was determined to figure out what was bothering him, as I had begun to realize how deeply my feelings for him had developed. After some coaxing, he finally opened up. He explained that he was running from a broken marriage that had shattered him. His wife had cheated on him with a close friend, and he had been so devastated that he nearly resorted to homicide and self-destruction. We spent the rest of the day talking, sharing our experiences with unfaithful spouses. My husband left me for another woman, and Mark left his wife because of her affair. We had common ground, and it seemed like talking it out helped him move past a painful chapter in his life. That conversation also marked the beginning of our deeper connection. We began seeing each other on weekends, maintaining our professional relationship during the week, and becoming romantically involved on Saturdays. After a month, it seemed pointless for Mark to continue living in the basement, so he moved into my bedroom. From that moment on, we became a family, though I still had the sense that he was hiding something from me. We continued to grow closer, and our relationship evolved. I know I love him, and I believe he loves both me and my son. In fact, I should say, our son, because that's how Mark feels about him. Our son is about to turn 4 and deserves a father's love, something his biological father has completely failed to provide. He hasn't seen his biological father in years. This brings us to 4 days ago when Mark collapsed at work. After 3 days in the ICU, doctors concluded that his condition was heart-related and that he would need open-heart surgery to correct an issue he had likely been born with. Once his condition stabilized, they moved him to a private room. It was then that we could finally talk. When I walked into his room, I could tell immediately that something was seriously bothering him. That's when he shared a story with me that he had been afraid would die with him if he didn't have the surgery. He needed to close that chapter of his life for good. He told me his story throughout the day, and once I promised to write it down and ensure it reached you, it seemed like a huge weight lifted off his shoulders. Now he's asleep, and I'm typing this on my laptop while our son lies next to him, also asleep. I think I have most of the night to finish this letter. I still need to go home to prepare a DVD, which I'll explain later, and gather a few other things before I can send this information. I plan to have it ready to send by noon tomorrow. I also need to figure out how to send it anonymously to ensure it can't be traced back to us. The story Mark shared with me, which I now consider to be my husband's story, began nearly 2 years ago. At the time, he was happily married to Lisa, and their marriage was approaching its 6th year. One night, for reasons he couldn't explain, he noticed a small bruise on the side of her right bosom. Initially, he thought it might have been caused by an accidental bump against furniture, either at home or at her part-time job as a secretary. But as he lay awake, he realized it looked more like a love bite than a bruise. And he knew it wasn't from him. That thought bothered him all night and stayed with him the next day. By the time he got to work, he had convinced himself that he was being paranoid. After all, there was no concrete evidence, just circumstantial details. Later that day, the manager from the parts department dropped by his office with a new tracking device for a trial run. The manager asked Mark to evaluate it and provide feedback. Mark was left with the device, the software, and instructions on how to use it. He quickly decided how he would test it. 3 days later, after installing the device in his wife's car, Mark decided to check the monitor program to see if it was working. She had told him she was going shopping that afternoon, but the device showed her car had left the house and headed straight for Blakemore's home, his best friend. An hour later, when he checked again, her car was still there. Suspecting something was off, he called her cell phone. When she claimed to be out shopping, Mark knew something was wrong. That evening, he casually asked how her day had gone, and she stuck to her story about going shopping. He told me that he felt physically sick, but decided not to jump to conclusions just yet. He decided to watch her for a week while he was out of town on business. He managed to track her car through 3 states. When she spent several hours at Blake's house from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., Mark confronted her the next day, and she insisted she had been home the entire night. That was when the truth hit him, and it shattered him. When he returned from his trip, he was consumed by thoughts of revenge. He knew Blake was a notorious ladies' man, but he never imagined his friend would go after his wife. That night, he visited the elderly widow next door under the pretense of borrowing a wrench from her late husband's toolbox. Mark knew that the old man had hidden a revolver at the bottom of the toolbox, something he had shown Mark in the past. Instead of taking the wrench, Mark grabbed the Colt. He explained to me that he planned to use it to eliminate Lisa and Blake, then end his own life. He decided to wait until the next time they met while he was in town. To keep an eye on his wife's movements, Mark ordered a tracking device for himself so he could return the one he'd borrowed. Fortunately, Lisa and Blake didn't meet for another week. If they had, my son and I would never have had the joy of seeing Mark again. During those waiting days, Mark devised a new plan. He decided to frame Lisa and Blake for homicide. He spent an entire week coming up with the details and another week gathering what he needed to make it happen. Once everything was set, he left for a business trip, confident that Lisa and Blake would meet while he was away. Upon confirming that she was heading to Blake's house, Mark put his plan into motion. He created a paper trail that made it seem like he was in the process of divorcing her. The last piece was an email to his lawyer, pointing directly to Lisa and Blake. But he almost forgot to send it, which could have ruined everything. Before leaving, he used the neighbor's revolver to shoot into the passenger seat of his own car and into a wooden block he had set up. He said the sound was muffled by an old blanket in the closed garage, but pulling the trigger gave him a sense of relief. He knew he had finally taken the first step in his revenge. He advised her to search for archived newspaper articles, which are available online, and to pick up a copy of the court transcripts. Mark followed the trial every day online, he added. According to him, the court reporters had documented the entire ordeal. As Mark began recounting his actions, the sequence of events seemed like one continuous story. He didn't want to interrupt, so some details might slip through the cracks in his retelling. Also, you should gather all the documents together, he recommended, That should help clarify things. Mark had parked his car in a quiet corner of a park near Blake's house, intending to prepare for the next phase of his plan. He unpacked a large gym bag, filled with the items he'd gathered, spreading them out on a picnic table, covering everything with an old blanket. First, he set up firewood, plastic sheeting, and a spare tire, arranging them on the plastic to create a clear drag trail leading out to the paved road. After stashing the tire back in the trunk, he scattered the firewood around the picnic area and removed the plastic. Using a small flashlight, he worked silently, careful not to draw attention. Once done, he sat quietly, waiting to see if anyone would show up. As I was sitting there, I inserted a needle into my left hand to draw blood, he noted. He explained that he had managed to buy everything he needed at a medical supply store by claiming he was taking care of his elderly mother. Using a makeshift plastic bag to collect almost 2 pints of blood, he worried about the blood clotting before he could dilute it with distilled water. It took over an hour to collect the blood, most of which I mixed with water, he said. With the blood, he sprayed a pattern on the ground, hoping it would resemble an arterial spray, and smeared the rest on the car seat and the ground to simulate heavy blood loss. He even filled the bullet hole in the firewood and the hole in the passenger seat upholstery with the blood. "I hope I'm getting everything right," he said, his voice calm but tired. "I don't really feel like waking him up to double-check. He needs his rest for his surgery tomorrow." He paused, carefully choosing his next words. "I pray everything goes smoothly and that he makes it through, even if I don't have all the details perfect." He continued, "I still need to make the DVD for you." Mark had taken photographs of his actions, before and after shots, on his digital camera. "There are even pictures of me drawing my own blood," he explained. Though he hadn't seen them himself, Mark had given him a password to access the files on their work server. He called them his souvenirs, he said, noting that despite the dim light, the pictures had turned out surprisingly well. Once he finished with the blood and car in the park, he packed up his gym bag and left. He had previously purchased an old car for this purpose and made his way to it, despite feeling lightheaded from blood loss. "I nearly passed out," he admitted. "I had to rest in the car until almost 6 a.m. before heading to Blake's house to finish what I started." To his surprise, Lisa's car was still parked there, unlocked. "That was a real stroke of luck," he said, as he managed to squeeze a few drops of blood onto the gas pedal. As he moved to Blake's car, he noticed a light on in Blake's bedroom, causing a brief surge of panic. "I thought they might have seen me." After quickly smearing blood on Blake's car, he sped off, heading for a payphone on the opposite side of the park. At sunrise, he used the payphone to call emergency, reporting a car in the park. To disguise his voice, he used a professional voice changer device he had purchased from a spy store in Pittsburgh. "It worked well," he said, explaining that he was able to adjust the tone and pitch of his voice, enough to make it sound like a woman's. After that, he went to a dock on the river where he discarded 2 shovels and a revolver into the water. "By the time I finished everything, I was completely drained," he said. "Up until then, I felt a surge of energy from realizing that everything was going according to plan." He'd rented a room at a nearby motel to lay low and recover. For 2 days, he rested, taking supplements and eating energy bars. "I'm a little hazy on the timeline," he admitted, "but at some point, I used the voice changer again and made another call, this time pretending to be an old man. That helped the police locate the revolver I had dumped." He paused, then added, "I'll read this to him in the morning and fix any mistakes. I really hope when he sees everything ready to go, it will give him peace. The reason he wanted me to send this to you is that he wants to sever all ties to his past life as Mark Evans." He explained that Mark had assumed his current identity before coming into their lives. "He never wants to be Mark Evans again," he said. "Please do whatever you can to help overturn the convictions of Lisa Evans and Blake Moore." Tomorrow, he planned to pick up a copy of the New York Times and an inkwell. Using part of the front page, he would press Mark's fingerprints clearly onto the paper and create a large blood stain using a needle. When compared to the DNA from the park, it would prove Mark was still alive. "That should be enough to get them out of jail," he added. The letter ended there, but there was a handwritten note at the bottom. "Mark came out of surgery well. He wants me to fly to Seattle tomorrow and send this package. I hate to leave him, but I know he'll feel better once this is sent. I told you this would affect 5 of us," he added, "but I don't think I explained what I meant." He and Mark were expecting twins in 3 months. Tony Kelly turned the page, looking for any additional notes, but it was blank. He glanced at the other items in the package. The DVD was labeled "Photos Taken in George Washington Park," and the envelope was marked "Fingerprints and DNA." After reviewing everything, he called one of the senior attorneys. This was too big for him to handle alone. It didn't take long to confirm that the DNA belonged to Mark Evans. The fingerprints taken from his car in the park also confirmed he was alive, with irrefutable proof that Lisa and Blake had been wrongfully convicted of a homicide that never happened. The state attorney general and governor fast-tracked their release. A week later, they were back in the courtroom, facing a new reality. The state attorney general issued an apology to the court system, acknowledging the errors and stating that the blame lay squarely with Mark Evans. While the judicial system had worked, it had been derailed by his determined actions. He also made it clear that their department would spare no effort in tracking down Mark Evans and holding him accountable for the costs incurred by the state. Police forensics, litigation, and prison time would all be counted, and efforts to recover the money would begin. When a reporter asked if they had any idea where Mark Evans might be, the attorney simply shook his head. Blake Moore seemed to have undergone a change. No longer the arrogant man he once was, he appeared more willing to compromise. He apologized to Lisa for triggering the chain of events that led to their incarceration. Lisa, however, seemed indifferent, accepting the check as if it were a trivial matter. "I think we deserve this," she said, slipping the check into her purse. "But I lost Mark forever." 2 weeks after a cable news segment on Lisa and Blake's release, a large envelope arrived at Attorney Basil Smith's office. Inside was a short note and a sealed letter addressed to Lisa Evans. Smith made an appointment to deliver it to her. At exactly 5 p.m., he arrived at Lisa's apartment. After a brief conversation, he left her standing at the door, holding the envelope. With hesitation, she took it to the kitchen and opened it. The familiar handwriting inside revealed a letter from Mark, and she couldn't resist reading it. "Lisa, I want to apologize for the time you spent in jail. I've never been vengeful, but your betrayal, along with Blake's, nearly broke me. My new life has shown me that I had to free you both to move on. I know the authorities will be looking for me, but I'm confident in my new life with my new family. Goodbye and good luck. M." The letter slipped from her hands, fluttering to the floor. In that moment, any hope of reconciling with Mark was gone for good. The months following Lisa and Blake's release saw them adjusting to life outside prison, each grappling with the damage done by Mark's elaborate deception. Lisa returned to her family, trying to rebuild the fragments of her life, but she remained haunted by the letter Mark had left her. His new life, untouched by the chaos he had orchestrated, seemed like a cruel mockery of her suffering. Blake, on the other hand, disappeared from public view. Rumors circulated that he had moved out of state, distancing himself from the community that had once labeled him a butcher. Some speculated that he sought redemption. Others believed he simply wanted to escape the shadow of Mark Evans. Meanwhile, Mark, or the man he had become, lived quietly with his new family, cherishing the life he had rebuilt from the ashes of his past. His actions had forever altered the lives of those he left behind, but to him, the sacrifices were necessary for his freedom and peace of mind. As the years went by, the story faded from headlines, leaving only whispers in the corners of Sharpsburg. For Lisa, Blake, and Mark, the scars remained, a silent reminder of how love, betrayal, and revenge can intertwine to create a storm that changes lives forever.